June 18th was both the best and the worst day of my life. Due to health concerns, my wife had been scheduled for a C-section. My heart filled with joy as the nurses gently handed me my newborn son as I sat in the recovery room. My eyes filled with tears as I stared into the tiny face of my now sleeping infant. I'd do anything for this child. Slowly, I tore my eyes away from him to look up to the nurse. "When can we see his mom?" I asked. Her eyes widened slightly. "They are finishing up as we speak. Don't worry, someone will come and get you when she's ready to see you." After walking me through using a bottle and explaining the call button, she left with a cheery, "Don't be afraid to call one of us if you need help." There I was, alone with my son. So many thoughts filled my mind: how I wished I had been a better man, how I longed to be a better father than mine, who had abandoned me at 12. As I stared into the angel-like face of my son, I felt scared, proud, and motivated to be the best dad I could be. As the hours passed, my joy slowly became replaced with a new feeling: worry. Where was Jessica? What was taking so long? Was this normal? Later that evening, a solemn doctor entered the room. "It's Grant, isn't it?" he said. "Yes, sir, that's right. Where's my wife? What's going on?" I said as I rose to my feet. He swallowed hard before saying, "I'm sorry, Grant. There was a serious complication, a heavy bleed, and well, I'm sorry, but your wife has passed away." I couldn't breathe. It felt like all the air had been forced out of my lungs. I fell back into my chair as a muffled scream finally exited my mouth. The tears soon followed. And almost as if he could sense my pain, my son joined in. A moment I will never forget. Through my own tears, I reached out to comfort my crying son. I cradled him in my arms, whispering to him that everything was going to be okay. All the while, my tears gently ran down my cheeks and dropped softly out his little head. Soon he calmed down. As he did, I held him out to look him in the face, and for the first time, his little eyes opened to see the world around him. He had his mother's eyes. I smiled, choking back more tears. "Hello, David. Jessica loved that name. It was her top choice. I love you, son, and mommy loves you too." I gazed into my son's perfect face. In a way, it was like staring at his mother. For a moment, hope and resolve filled my mind. My Jessica had given me a great gift. I loved David more fiercely than I'd ever loved anyone. I promised myself there and then to give David the world. I noticed then something that didn't bother me at the time. David's beautiful little eyes didn't look back into mine. Instead, they stared off into the empty space just above my left shoulder. That was 5 years ago. It hasn't been easy being a single dad. Several years ago, I got the courage to ask my boss if I could do the majority of my work from home. Really, all that's required to work in accounting nowadays is a laptop and a good Wi-Fi connection. My boss was gracious enough to agree when he heard of my situation. Years as a corporate accountant have allowed me to afford a small home in the suburbs that is more than enough room for the two of us. David has grown into a healthy and happy little boy. Next month he will be 5. His light blonde hair and deep blue eyes remind me so much of his mother. His smile and laughter light up any room, and my life is altogether better because of my boy. Yet something strange has been happening lately. I suppose that's why I'm writing this. Maybe someone out there will know what's happening or what I should do. Ever since his first day of life, I've noticed David staring at something behind me. When he was an infant, they told me don't worry about it. It takes time for baby's eyes to focus and identify faces from random objects. In no time, I should notice him doing it less and less. When the doctor said this, I was relieved, but the only thing is, that's not what happened. He never stopped. As a 1-year-old, he would look vaguely in my direction, but as I got closer, it was clear he was looking behind me, not at me. He would adjust when I talked to him. I'd say, "Hi, David." His eyes would shift from looking over my shoulder to looking into my eyes. "Hi, Dada," he would say with a smile. But as I lost his attention, his gaze would move behind me. He would just stare at nothing. Every now and again he would smile at nothing, shake his head yes and yell, "Yeah," or shake his head no and yell no, no. This concerned me. As a first-time parent, I had no idea what was normal toddler behavior and what wasn't. I remember that at one point, out of pure uncertainty, I called my deadbeat mom. All her life, my mom was unable to turn away from the same vices that ruled her when I was a child. Though she was now nearly 60, she was not very different from the alcoholic, drug-addicted 25-year-old I remember from my childhood. "What do you want?" Her loud, raspy smoker's voice startled me. "Mom, it's me," I said back into my phone. "Oh, Grant, itsy baby, what do you want?" came the reply. "I just wanted to ask you, is it normal for toddlers to stare off at nothing?" After a moment she said, "How should I know? What do you think I am?" Some sort of child psychologist? I'm sure whatever is eating at you is fine. Kids are kids. Who knows why the hell they do what they do? Look, Gran, I really have to go. With that, she hung up the phone. Putting down the phone, I muttered to myself, thanks a lot, Mom. Over David's toddler years, the doctors didn't seem to be concerned either. I often heard, oh, that's not really a concern. He's probably just a little shy. Some kids take longer developing socially, not a big deal. Shortly after David's 4th birthday, I finally convinced myself that it was not a big deal. David was such a sweet and caring little boy. He wasn't antisocial, though it was difficult finding friends his age. Overall, he was very smart for his age, so then why was I concerned? I needed to accept him for who he was and not try to change him. I decided then not to be bothered by it anymore. The following months were good, work was going smoothly, I was finally starting to make some friends in the neighbor, and David would be starting kindergarten in the fall. Life was finally feeling normal, up until last month when suddenly in the middle of the night I heard quiet whispering coming from David's room. Rubbing the sleep from my eyes, I slowly walked the short hallway from my room to David's. I cracked the door open as quietly as I could. Just in case I had misheard, I didn't want to wake him. His dark room was gently lit by a little night lamp, which cast strange shadows on the walls. My body tensed up slightly as I saw David. He sat on the floor, back to me in the door, as he stared into an empty corner of the room. He wasn't staring straight ahead into the corner, rather his head was looking slightly up as he stared off somewhere near the ceiling. He was whispering. I heard him say things like, I'm glad you're here. Can I come with you? Do you want to play? I was creeped out. I felt certain he must be sleepwalking. Although that is creepy, nonetheless. I quietly opened the door farther before saying, David, what are you doing? It's past bedtime. We can play tomorrow. He went quiet and didn't move. A moment later, he whispered, he says it's bedtime. I have to go. Before standing up and silently returning to his bed, he fell asleep instantly. I didn't sleep well that night. The next day was a Saturday. I still felt pretty unnerved about last night, so as we sat at the breakfast table and I watched David eat his bowl of Fruit Loops, I asked, hey buddy, do you remember when Daddy came to your room last night? David didn't even look up from his cereal. He just said, yeah. Who were you talking to last night? My friend? I was puzzled, your friend. Does he have a name? He nodded. His name is Billy. I frowned. Is Billy always in your room? He shook his head. No. Do you know where Billy is? He looked up, but not at me. Past me. Yeah, he's behind you. At that moment, I felt on the back of my neck the slightest movement of air, almost like someone directly behind you breathing on your neck. I don't know why, but I didn't want to turn around, but I forced myself to turn my head and look behind me. Of course, there was nothing there, just our empty kitchen. That evening, we had been invited to a cookout with a new family that moved into the house across the street. They had a young boy named Clay who was a little over a year older than David, and the two had become fast friends. Shortly after lunch, David asked to go over to Clay's to play before the cookout. I had to catch up on some work projects, so I told him to go ahead and to have fun. After watching to be sure that he had crossed the street safely, I retreated to my office, put my earbuds in, and got to work. After about an hour, I felt a light tap on my shoulder. Thinking David had come back home and needed something, I took out my earbuds and spun around in my chair ready to greet him. But David wasn't there. In fact, no one was. I was alone. Confused, I walked around the house, calling for David. As I passed by the front window, I peeked out and saw David and Clay playing joyfully on the lawn across the street. Swallowing hard, I turned to face my empty house. Tried my best to convince myself that I was just tired and must have imagined it. That night was great. The cookout was just what David and I needed. The time with other parents made me feel like I wasn't the only one struggling with raising my son. I stood next to Clay's dad, Brad, as he manned the grill. We talked about our work, sports, and our hobbies. Brad was easy to get along with. He was charismatic and easygoing. I anticipated we would become fast friends. Hey Brad, question for you, I said as he started pulling the hot dogs off the grill. Shoot, he replied. Did Clay ever have an imaginary friend? He chuckled. Why? Does David have an invisible buddy? Yeah, and it's really weirding me out. Maybe it's just because it's just the two of us. But I don't know, kind of creeping me out. Well, to answer your question, yeah, Clay had one of those for a while, called it Mr. Buttons. I got a buddy who's a counselor, and he said it's pretty normal and can actually help their imagination develop. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. I nodded, thanks man, that helps. I'm sure my wife would have known what to do, and I don't know. Sometimes I don't feel like I know what I'm doing. He put his hand on my shoulder. We all feel that way from time to time, but you can always come to us for help. After all, it takes a village. He handed me a plate with a hot dog on it. Thanks, man, for everything. 9 p.m. rolled around and everyone started heading home. David held my hand as we crossed the street back to our house. In the middle of the street, he looked up at me and said, "Daddy, could my friend do a sleepover tonight?" "Well, I guess we could go ask Clay's parents, but it's kind of late." He giggled. "No, not Clay, Billy." "Billy?" "Yeah, Billy wants to spend the night, can he? Please?" I hesitated, but then remembered Brad's words. "Yeah, I think that would be fine." Then jokingly added, "But maybe we should ask Billy's parents first." David laughed. "Billy doesn't have parents. He's very old." Somehow that didn't make me feel any better. The rest of the summer was mundane. As much as I didn't like it, I got used to my son talking more and more about his imaginary friend. A month before David started kindergarten, I found him sitting alone in the corner of his room. He was quietly crying. His knees were brought up close to his chest and his forehead rested upon them. "David, what's wrong?" He looked up when I spoke, snuffled, and wiped his nose with his hand. "Nothing," he weakly said. I walked in and sat on the floor next to him, gently wrapping my arm around him. "What's going on, big guy?" I asked softly. He didn't say anything for a while, just sat there sobbing quietly. After a few moments, I heard a low whisper. "Daddy?" "Yes, David?" I whispered back. "Where's Mommy?" A lump formed in my throat. This is the type of conversation the parenting books don't prepare you for. "Well, son, Mommy got really sick and well." Tears formed in my eyes. I had no idea how to have this talk. "Well, she died, son." David's wet eyes looked at me, not sure what I meant. "Billy says she didn't want me, so she left." I could feel a wave of anger coming over me. Jessica had given her life to have David. Of course she wanted him. But I remembered this was David trying to understand why everyone else had a mom and why he didn't. He was struggling with death and using Billy as a guise to voice feelings. I'm sure he felt. "No, not at all, son. She loved you very much. She just got really sick and had to leave. It's not because of you at all. She wanted you so much." He looked at me. "Is she ever coming back?" Holding back tears, I slowly shook my head and whispered, "No, I'm afraid not. Billy says he saw her leave." I pulled my son in close for a tight hug as tears ran down my face. "It's not true, David. Billy wasn't there. Mommy loved you very much, and so do I." He hugged me back. "I love you too, Daddy." The last few weeks of summer, a change took place in my son. David had always been a shy kid, but he had become downright quiet. He spent less and less time with Clay and the other kids of the neighborhood, and more time wandering the halls and rooms of our home, despite my best efforts to get him to go play with his friends. As I drove him to the kindergarten for the first time, it dawned on me that David had become a completely different child. He rarely looked me or anyone else in the eye. He simply stared at the ground. My heart broke as I looked at my son in the rearview mirror. He reminded me of another little boy, a little fatherless boy whose absent mother didn't care, a little boy who shut himself off from the world. Seeing my son like this reminded me of myself. "Hey, buddy, you're gonna have so much fun and meet so many new people today. And when you get home, how about you and I go to the park?" He just stared out the window. "Okay," he replied. After dropping him off and returning to my car, I sat there in the parking lot. I hoped beyond hope that David would forget about Billy as he met new friends at school. And for the first couple weeks, it seemed like that was the case. His mood lightened, he smiled more. I felt like I had gotten my little boy back. That is, until I got a phone call. "Hello, this is Grant," I said into my phone. "Hello, Grant. This is Miss Perkinson from your son's school. David is currently sitting in my office at the request of his teacher, Mrs. Williams. It seems he has been upsetting his fellow students. If you are available, could you please come and pick him up?" "I'll be right there," I said, barely masking my confusion. What was going on? David had never acted up in this way before. What was happening to my son? As I got into my car, I couldn't help but think of my wife. "I miss you, Jess." I whispered aloud. David could really use his mom right now. As I entered the principal's office, I saw my son sitting silently in a chair staring at the ground. Across the desk sat Miss Perkinson, who was tenderly trying to encourage him to speak. He looked up at me when I walked in, before his eyes moved to the empty corner across the room, where they remained fixated. Miss Perkinson stood and walked to me. In a whisper she said, "Thank you for coming, Grant. David has been drawing some rather disturbing pictures." She handed me a folded piece of paper. "He won't listen to his teacher. Normally he's such a good boy. This is very unusual. We're hoping some extra time with his dad will help." "Thank you, Miss Perkinson. I'll take it from here." Turning to David, I said, "Hey buddy, we're gonna spend the day together. How's that sound?" He stood up, but his eyes didn't leave the corner until I reached for his hand. As we walked out of the school, I unfolded the paper Miss Perkinson handed me. On the paper was a crude drawing of 3 stick figures. It looked like it was drawn in anger. The crayon strokes looked like they were pushed hard and aggressively. 2 of the figures stood together holding hands. One was a little boy with a wide smile on his face. The other was an extremely tall figure, completely black. Its arms and legs were far longer than its torso. Further down on the paper, the third figure, lying horizontally on the page, its face was clearly sad, and red blots covered its body. I looked down at my son. "David, did you draw this?" He stared at the ground and shook his head no. "Billy did." I swallowed and asked, "Is that you and Billy holding hands?" He nodded. "And the other one, is that me?" He sniffled before nodding. As we reached the car, I got down on one knee to look him in the eye. "David, could you look at me?" Slowly his head looked up. I could see his eyes quiver as he struggled to hold back tears. My heart broke with compassion as I pulled him in for a hug. "David, I love you so much. I don't tell you that enough, and I'm sorry. You mean everything to me. I know Billy has been your friend, but right now it seems like he's not being a good friend. You should know, though, I'll always be your friend. I love you, son." He violently rubbed his eyes. "I love you, Daddy." As we pulled into the driveway, I turned to David and said, "How about you go change into your pajamas, and we'll watch some movies together? Later we can get some pizza. How's that sound?" At that, my son perked up. With a smile, he responded, "Okay." He trotted upstairs as I browsed the TV for a good movie. A moment later, a loud scream broke through the house. Adrenaline shot through my veins as I sprinted upstairs. Bursting through the bedroom door, I shouted, "David, are you okay?" I saw him lying in the corner. His body shook with uncontrollable cries. I rushed to him, gently turned him over to see his face. The left side of his face was deeply bruised and a thin stream of blood flowed from his lip. "David, what happened?" Through tears, he said, "Billy's mad." "What?" I declared in disbelief. I told him I don't love him anymore, and now he's mad. My body shook with anger. As I sprung to my feet, I turned and screamed to the empty room, "Who's there? Get the hell out of my house. Leave us alone." In my rage, I kicked the ball that sat in the middle of David's floor. It sailed through the air and landed in the open closet. My rant continued. Soon my anger lessened and I stopped shouting to catch my breath. In the momentary silence, I heard a noise. I spun around in time to watch the ball I had kicked slowly roll out of the closet. Every hair on my body stood up. Without taking my eyes from the closet, I reached around for the baseball bat that lay under David's bed. My fingers found it, and taking it, I viciously swung it into the small closet. There was nothing there. The bat bounced off the wall in the back. I pushed aside the hanging clothes and found nothing. I turned back to see David, and as I did, I felt impossibly strong fingers wrapped around my neck. I gasped for air but didn't find any. Panic began to fill my mind as a cruel, cracked whisper from behind. "He belongs to me." The room erupted with deep, gurgled laughter as I struggled for air. Then, suddenly the fingers released, though the laughter remained. Air flooded into my lungs as I fell to my knees. I glanced behind me and saw nothing. Then I looked at my son, who cowered into the corner. His hands tightly covered his ears as he tried to drown out the laughter. In a moment I reached him, carried him in my arms, and dashed to the stairway. The laughter continued throughout the house. It wasn't until we got outside that it stopped. I'm writing this from a hotel room. David and I are leaving. I don't know where we're going, just not here. David looked at me, his face completely pale. "Daddy, what?" "He's here," he whimpered. A knot formed in my throat. "He says he's going to kill you." He barely got the words out. I clenched my teeth and stared deep into my son's eyes. "Where is he?" He stares back at me before slightly glancing over my shoulder. "Behind you."